Hey everyone, how's it going? And once again, we return to another one of Jeff Loeb's and Tim Sale's stories. Last year, we started the Marvel Color series with Daredevil Yellow, a story that retold the early days of Matt Murdock as he goes from the blind lawyer of Hell's Kitchen to New York's guardian devil, all while remembering his lost love, Karen Page. As the running theme of the series was the remembrance of lost love. So of course, in June of 2002, only 5 months after finishing up Daredevil Yellow, who else would Loeb and Sale cover but with Peter Parker, the kid who has one of the most iconic tragic love stories in comics, with him losing his love in the night Gwen Stacy died in 1973. I could do a whole video on my thoughts on how Marvel has been treating this story and how writers have been handling Gwen's character since then, from the constant use of Peter reliving the event or retconning what Gwen did before her death only to retcon it later, which thank you, Nick Spencer. Seriously, that story wasn't perfect, but at least that was undone. But that could be a topic in its own video, though I will talk about some of it here. Now, did Loeb and Sale knock it out of the park like they did Daredevil Yellow, or did this leave me blue? Well, let's get into the swing of things in Spider-Man Blue. Warning, spoilers. Now listen up, because here's a story about a little spider that lived in a blue world. There, I made the reference. Moving on. Much like D&D Yellow, we start with Spider-Man in modern day narrating to the departed Gwen. But while Matt wrote Karen a letter, Peter is actually using a tape recorder to talk to Gwen. It's Valentine's Day, but he's not getting into the holiday spirit, as it reminds him of the story where him and Gwen fell in love. Or, as he puts it, almost didn't fall in love. Now, you must be thinking, why am I not covering this on Valentine's Day instead of doing it in November? Well, I talked more about it in my issue 5 of Batman Long Halloween reviews, but short version, I don't celebrate the holiday, so yeah, don't be surprised that I don't give a crap. Anyway, Peter returns to the bridge where she died, and in fact, it's where he goes every Valentine's Day. Once that's done, we flash back to a few years ago. Well, the Marvel timeline equivalent to a few years, it's weird. And we see a reenactment of Amazing Spider-Man number 40, where Norman discovered Peter Parker's secret identity, only for him to suffer amnesia, and Peter removing the Green Goblin costume and telling the authorities that the Green Goblin was dead. Though Norman really was a close call, as next day Peter talks to Harry, and it reveals that Norman is barely alive thanks to the fire, and that Harry would need to take care of him for a while. Peter tells him, as someone who lost his father figure, that it's worth it doing anything for their family. Kind words that I'm pretty sure will not bite Peter in the ass several times. Peter leaves but bumps into Harry's group of friends, in particular Gwen Stacy. Peter heads back home and he winds up talking to Aunt May about maybe getting the money for a motorcycle, and after May shares a bit of her past where Uncle Ben actually owned a motorcycle, she hands him some money that she and Ben actually saved for him for just such an occasion. May, you know, that's sweet and everything, but I feel like that money could have helped with a lot of financial issues. And heck, Peter even debates on whether or not he should really spend the money for something like this. But after seeing his former high school bully, now college bully, Flash with Gwen, he takes it and it pays off. Yep, it looks like Peter and Gwen are gonna have a good... Yeah, I can't say that with a straight face. Of course, it immediately gets complicated. After taking down the Rhino, Pete scores a date with Gwen, only to be reminded by Aunt May that he already promised to meet her friend's niece, Mary Jane Watson. And jackpot! And thus, we see a reenactment of how Peter Parker became the first harem protagonist in Marvel. As the story goes on, we see Harry and Peter become best friends, MJ becoming fast friends with everyone, Spider-Man fighting classic foes and saving lives like curing Kirk Connors of the Lizard, which will definitely be the last time he will ever have to do that. And of course, seeing how Peter and Gwen almost didn't fall in love that fateful night on Valentine's Day. But to see that, you're gonna have to read for yourself. Spider-Man Blue is a fun throwback to classic Lee Ditko era Spider-Man. Though I'll be honest, I think Daredevil Yellow was the better story, at least when it comes to incorporating new stories while retelling classic stories, like when MJ first met Peter. That actually happened in Spider-Man number 25, but as mentioned, the story began reenacting events from number 40, and though Peter did fight Rhino afterwards, it was actually his first appearance. While in this comic, it's already established that Peter and Rhino already have history. The only story that didn't have too much of an alteration in history is the Lizard story, but besides that, yeah, they kind of switch things around a lot. I know it's kind of a nitpick, but I just thought it was really impressive how they were able to blend their own stories with the classics. The choice of changing up the narration from writing a letter to a tape recorder sounds neat, but the running joke of Peter having technical issues got old pretty fast. It would probably work better if it was being told in a movie movie or TV show, while in the comic it just feels a little weird. As for the romance between Gwen and Peter, it's pretty sweet, though I do feel like we should have spent more time with them together instead of in a group. Hell, Peter spent more time with MJ. Yeah, I know MJ and Peter was the end game, or at least it used to be, but it's about Gwen and Peter. As for the love triangle, it's pretty entertaining, and of course it had a lot of hilarious moments, like when Peter is in bed sick, but I feel like it could have been more interesting if they had a little bit more drama to it. Now, moving on to characters, we of course start with our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Not unlike Daredevil or even the Evil Dead comic I covered last month, we fascinatingly dive deep into his character as his older self narrates and pretty much criticize his younger self's actions. Since as a teenager, he makes it pretty clear that though still being kind-hearted and willing to sacrifice his happiness for others, he's also still a teenager, meaning that he did still have some selfish moments that make trouble for him later down the road. Loeb also did a good job keeping Peter relatable by making his dialogue more casual compared to Matt's, where in Daredevil Yellow, he's more poetic, diving deeper into symbolism. Peter also comes off as more truthful, since as I said in Daredevil Yellow, it felt like Matt was saying things in rose-colored lenses. Peter, though, is very honest, especially since by that point, he was at peace with what happened to Gwen. Well, at least here. Speaking of Gwen, this comic really helps rejuvenate her character, since after a while, it started to feel like Marvel fans could only remember Gwen for her death, and it really doesn't help that we have writers who constantly go back to it. In here though, we get to know Gwen and see why Peter loves her. She's intelligent, confident, but also a little playfully devious. They also kind of fix up her character a little bit, since in the early comics, she could easily be seen as pretty shallow, but in here, it wasn't really the case, and was more of her waiting for Peter to make a move and be more confident. I also do like that the comic doesn't recreate her death, not just because it's overdone, but also it shows that Loeb didn't have to rely on it to make the story memorable. It makes the comic feel essential when it comes to getting to know Gwen Stacy. Again, the only issue I really had was that I do feel like her and Peter should have spent more time together as a couple, but still. MJ, like Peter, is pretty close to her early days with a few updates. She's the fun party girl with a heart of gold, with her motivations kinda left in a bit of a mystery where you can't tell if she's interested in Peter or if she's trying to help Peter with Gwen, or just having some fun. Again, us the fans already know, but seeing Peter trying to figure it out by himself only to either get frustrated or embarrassed is pretty hilarious. I do think though Loeb could have dived more into her personal life since the story is being told by the older Peter Parker, and since he does know what MJ was actually going through at the time, could have been a good way to remind us that she is more than Spider-Man's girlfriend slash ex-wife slash, depending if those fan theories regarding Wells' run is true, baby mama. Harry Osborn and Flash Thompson were surprising here, as I just expected them to focus on Peter's love life, but this comic does give the two moments where they grow. We see Peter and Harry grow as friends, but we also see Harry develop to more of an adult as he struggles to deal with his new responsibilities taking care of his dad, who though is barely in the comic after his defeat in the beginning, still has a presence that is felt looming over Harry the entire time. It's also a bit tragic for long-term fans, since besides his, of course, turn to evil, we also see the beginning of his romantic interest in MJ, which would become very unhealthy. Flash, though, less developed, starting off as the classic bully, but then becoming more of a frenemy to Peter, and eventually showing off his fanboy side for Spider-Man. It's not something we're unfamiliar with, but it was interesting to see Loeb's take, though I honestly think the Untold Stories handled it a little bit better, but that's a story for another time. As for the supporting cast and villains, we're all pretty solid, and definitely were the characters we all know and love, though I do think we should have spent more time with them. Sure, we get some stuff like the reintroduction of Drago as Vulture, and Kurt helping Spider-Man a little bit before he becomes a lizard, but I feel like they were a rewrite away to really become a star for the story. Tim Sale's art is of course really great, and it was cool to see him blend his own style with Ditko in very interesting ways. I do wish that they stuck with the watercolor feature that they did with Daredevil Yellow, since it really gave the series its own unique style compared to his work in DC, which reminds me I should cover Superman of all seasons at some point. In the end, despite not being as cool as its predecessor, Spider-Man Blue is still a fun comic. It brings back classic Spider-Man adventures while also giving a character a chance to have the readers fall in love with her again. Not sure why they called Spider-Man Blue though, since unlike Yellow, it's not really a color Spider-Man is associated with. Yeah, Peter feels blue and there's some blue in the costume, but it just feels forced compared to Matt. But maybe just me. Pick up the book for yourself and let me know in the comments what you guys think. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and since we aren't doing lore or the Rick and Morty D&D review, I have something else planned for Thanksgiving. What will that be? Well, as I said before, much like the Rick and Morty comic, it's something that has been a long time coming. Later.